This is a haggis.
First things first, I promise I didn't shoot it. That's just a bad national joke, although there is a hunting connection. As dishes go, it is kind of a weird one, but people love it.
This is Alloway, home of celebrity steamboat, awful enthusiast and sometime poet, Robert the Burns.
Burns loved haggis, so much he actually wrote a poem talking to one. And now, every year throughout the world, on the 25th of January, people do the same thing. But what is a haggis? Why is it illegal in America? How do we eat it? And maybe most of all, why? Welcome to Scotland Unplugged, and the story of a decidedly questionable national dish. Full disclosure, I haven't always been a fan. When I was a kid, I kind of hated it, probably because of the washed out dreariness of Scottish school lunches in the 1980s. When I was an adult, I had to give it up because it was giving me heartburn. But then I realised that might have had more to do with the amount of whiskey I'd had along with it. The Encyclopaedia Britannica defines haggis as the liver, lungs and heart of a sheep, or other animal, minced and mixed with beef or mutton, suet and oatmeal, and seasoned with onion, cayenne pepper and other spices, then packed into a sheep's stomach and boiled. But why? Who came up with that idea? It might be our national dish, but it wasn't always Scottish. The food historian Catherine Brown discovered a cookery book by Gervase Markham from 1615 that includes what we'd recognise as haggis. The book was called The English Housewife, but its roots go back way further than that. The Roman writer and gourmet Marcus Apicius, and even the Greek poet Homer, who lived around 8000 BC, described similar ways of cooking offal. In particular, a Roman pork-based version where if an animal, let's say a feisty but tasty wild boar, was killed on a hunt, they would take out the organs, pack them in salt, and stuff them into the stomach. Admittedly, that doesn't sound too appetising, but it was all about lack of waste and preserving things. Organs don't travel too well. The first written mention of a dish with a similar name, Haggis of sheep, is in the catchily titled 15th century cookbook Liber Cur Cocorum, and that was from Lancashire. The recipe though was for a combination of offal and herbs. The first Scottish reference to the word was around 90 years later in a poem, The Flighting of Dunbar and Kennedy. Without any real evidence of the true origins of haggis, or even the etymology of the word haggis, it has been suggested it could have been brought here by the Vikings, and that the origins of the name are in Old Norse, Old Icelandic, or even Old Scots. Some people like to think it comes from the days of Highland drovers, who may have needed a way of carrying supplies easily, or that when the local laird slaughtered an animal, the men were allowed to keep the offal as their share. It's been thought of as Scottish since the mid-18th century, and it's worth saying that the version we eat now has been refined down the years and is distinctly ours. It's a cheap food in what would have been a tough environment, making all the parts of the animal go as far as possible. We're nothing if not frugal.
But not everyone approves.
The FDA banned the import of haggis into the USA in 1971 due to it not being considered a foodstuff, as apparently the heart and lungs of a sheep were not considered edible. Who'd have thought? That led some holiday-making Scottish cousins to some high-stakes bootlegging, risking deportation to help out relatives in need across the pond. Robert Burns composed his poem To a Haggis in 1786. He was a farmer's son, a man of the people who'd known hard times and would have been brought up on the stuff, probably as a luxury. Burns died in 1796 at the age of 37. 5 years later, on the anniversary of his death, the first Burns supper happened. Some of his friends met here, raised a glass or two, sang some of his songs, and yes, ate some haggis, along with sheep's head. Then it became a thing. These days it happens on his birthday. and it's kind of global. Every 25th of January, people in Scotland and across the world talk to their own haggises, haggai, and then eat them with neeps and tatties, turnips and potatoes, or if you believe my autocorrect, needs and tattoos, which sounds like a whole other bag of trouble. People also play bagpipes, wear kilts, and do other things Burns probably wouldn't have. And that's really what led to it being our national dish. But it's not just a celebration thing. People here eat haggis year-round as part of a full Scottish breakfast, as a stuffing, as an alternative option when you need something to deep fry. There's vegetarian haggis, kosher haggis, haggis burgers, haggis pizza, haggis nachos, haggis bonbons, even haggis pakora. We do like to innovate,